If you're married, your Social Security break-even age might be wrong. Most people run the numbers based only on their own benefit. They compare filing at 62, 67, or 70, and they look for the age where the cumulative payments catch up. But Social Security doesn't pay two individuals living separate financial lives. It pays a household. And once you factor in spousal benefits, the math can shift sometimes in ways that can surprise people. So, there's two rules that you need to understand before we go any further. First, spousal benefits do not increase beyond the full retirement age of the spouse receiving them. And second, a spousal benefit cannot be paid until the higher earning spouse files for their own benefit. Now, that second rule is where the strategy starts to change because when one spouse delays, they may also be delaying household income that doesn't grow because of the delay. Now, on my website, I have a break-even calculator that compares filing ages by adding up the total dollars received under each option. Since filing later gives you a larger monthly benefit, there will eventually be an age where the cumulative total from that later filing age catches up to the earlier one, and that age is the break-even age. If you live past that age, the later filing age pays more over your lifetime, and if you don't, the earlier filing age pays more. Now that analysis is useful, but today is a perfect example of why it should not be the only factor in your decision. So to keep this simple, let's look at this decision purely through the lens of cumulative household benefits, that break-even analysis. And I know there's a lot more to think about, like survivor benefits and how this fits into your overall tax and withdrawal plan, but I want to keep this straightforward for today so you can see the difference that a spousal benefit can make based on your filing age. So let's use the simplified example where both spouses are currently age 62, so they have the full array of filing options ahead of them. And to make it more realistic, let's go ahead and assume the annual cost of living adjustment of 3%. Now, for this example, the higher earner has a full retirement age benefit or primary insurance amount of $3,000 per month. And in this case, let's just assume that the other spouse does not have a benefit of their own at all. So they'll be eligible for a spousal benefit that could bring their total up to $1 half of their spouse's full retirement age benefit. So, that effectively means that at full retirement age, that spouse that doesn't have a benefit, they could still get a spousal benefit. It would be about $1,500. But, and this is the part that a lot of people tend to gloss over, they can't receive that spousal benefit until the higher earner files. So the timing of when the spouse with the benefit files completely controls when the household can access that additional income from the spousal benefit. And that's where the strategy starts to get really interesting. So let's look at a break-even analysis like a lot of people would run. This would be, a spouse who had a benefit from their own work, and they're just trying to see when do the cumulative payments for the different filing ages catch up. And, they just figure that whenever they file, the spousal benefit would just turn on, and they don't really count that in the cumulative benefits. And that's what I see very common. So if we just look at ages 62, 67, and 70, we can see that the cumulative benefits received between 62 and 67 break even at 75. And if we bring in the line that shows filing at 70, we can see the break-even age between 62 and 70 is age 78. And then if we compare filing at 67 versus 70, the break-even age is 80. But remember, this is not taking into account the spousal benefit that's going to get turned on as soon as the spouse with their own benefit files. So, while that spouse may be delaying to get a higher benefit, for every month it ticks by, there's a spousal benefit that's not being paid, and that starts to change the math. But interestingly, it only changes the math if you file at or beyond a certain point. So when we bring household benefits in and look at that spousal benefit, the break-even age between filing at 62 and 67 or 62 and 70, they don't change much at all. And that's because between age 62 and full retirement age, the spousal benefit is still increasing because early filing reductions are starting to disappear and drop off. So delaying during that window, it increases both the worker's benefit and the spousal benefit. But after full retirement age, the rules start to change. The worker's benefit continues to grow because of those delayed retirement credits, but the spousal benefit doesn't. It stops growing at full retirement age. So every month that you delay beyond that point, you're giving up a spousal payment that isn't getting any bigger, and that's what pushes the break even further out. And in this case, it's from age 80 to age 84. So to recap this, If we look at the break-even ages with and without spousal benefits, we don't see any differences until we get to those ages beyond full retirement age. But you do see a difference at full retirement age and beyond. So this is something you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about how long you plan to delay. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that could change this. I've used an example of a spouse who didn't have any benefit of their own. If that lower earning spouse or the no earning spouse, if they do actually have a benefit of their own, that's going to change things, even if they're going to get a portion of it as a spousal payment. And by the way, getting clear on that spousal payment is really important. And I know it's not always straightforward and easy to figure out, but this piece is important to understand because the larger the amount that's coming from the spousal payment, the more important this is to time your filing so you aren't stepping over dollars today for maybe the same amount of dollars in the future. Now, obviously, this was a simple illustration that we used, and that's rarely the way it works, but I really wanted to drive home that when you start looking at Social Security through a household lens instead of this individual lens, the best filing age can start to look completely different. And yes, there are plenty of personal factors that matter more than the break-even analysis. And the reality is that there's just no single factor that should be the reason you file at a certain age. You've got spousal benefits, survivor benefits, taxes, how your accounts are structured, and your need for income. All of that combining together, and likely a laundry list of other considerations too. But data points like the one that we've talked about today can certainly help make the trade-offs easier to understand. And when you can see the numbers clearly, it becomes one of the pieces that can help you make a confident decision about filing for benefits. All right, thanks for watching.